Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Power of Federated Search, Supercharge Member Engagement, led by Johnny Clayton and Adam Hostetter from Fuse Search. My name is Janie Albright, and I'm your webinar moderator today. First, I want to acquaint you with some of our event technology. To ask a question or connect with other attendees, you'll go to the right-hand side of your screen where you can either use the chat function or the Q&A tab. Any questions or comments put into the chat will be seen by all attendees and presenters, while the Q&A tab can be used to ask questions privately. With that, let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and thanks so much to the Blue Sky eLearn team and to the entire Blue Sky community. And we know you have a lot of choices of what you could be doing with your time, and so we're very excited that you're spending some of it with us. And also a special shout out to Janie and Kai from Blue Sky for helping coordinate. As Janie said, please get to us in the chat. We love to see what other organizations are doing in this space. That's one of the great things about this community is everyone tends to share. This is what works for us. Also, it's not one size fits all. Some organizations are much smaller, some are much larger, some are right in between. And there could be different solutions that come into play depending on the size of your group. So let us know some of the creative solutions that you've deployed. And we would love, again, to see about it in the chat. We'll try to keep up with that during the presentation. Then, as Janie said, we'll circle back at the end and have some additional conversation. So let's start off first with, what's your problem? What's going on? Why are we here? What are we talking? And it really comes down to this. Over the last decade or so, let's say, it may be a little bit longer for some of you, you've accumulated a lot of systems. It's like stuff in your drawer in the kitchen. You have that drawer that all stuff ends up in, or maybe it's that center console in your car where you're like, oh yeah, that's where that pen went. Your organization has picked up different systems. You don't just run on one thing. It's not just one platform at play. You have a learning management system path. You have maybe a member community. You maybe have publications. You maybe have videos. In addition to your website, you've collected these different systems, and your knowledge as an organization is also in all these different systems. And so there is this thinking of, hey, we need to have a knowledge base, something that has all of our knowledge together. But in reality, your knowledge base is a bunch of individual systems together as one. And software used to be marketed this way. There were tools that said, we do it all. We got everything. We're your community, and we're also your publication platform. And by the way, we're also a store, and we can also manage your member data. Well, now there's this thinking that, well, is it really good to have one system that does things in a nah way versus having a best of breed system that does one or two things really, really super well. And now with how ubiquitous SaaS is, software as a service, you can get into these systems relatively inexpensively. And it's kind of a no-brainer to go and try out these different systems, see how they work, incorporate them into your infrastructure, your organization, and see how they do. Here's some examples of different systems that maybe your organization has. I know you at least got two of these. Many of you are running Blue Sky product, learning management system, for example. You also have like website, maybe you got some videos on a different platform. Maybe you're using an event management system is in the mix too. And then there's other things here as well. How do you deal with this? All of this knowledge is that valuable, and it's across all of these different systems. And what you want to do is allow your members and your prospective members to interact with them. But how do you do that when they're siloed like this, right, Johnny?
Right. So I think what we're talking about here is coming together around a content aggregation platform. And a good analogy for that is your cable provider or Apple TV, some of those systems where they're aggregating all the different SaaS platforms that provide all the content, the movies, the TV shows that you're looking for. But when people use those systems, they don't really care where the show is. They just want to be able to watch ET with their kids. So there's a lot of ways that this has cut down on the number of journeys that people have to take to find the content. And in your organization, your AMS may serve as that cable box, or at least it is trying to, or your CMS is trying to do that. But with a real content aggregation system, you would be able to do that, and that's what we're going to talk about more today.
That's right. And this is sort of a first world problem, right? Where it's just a real life example that happened to me. It's like, okay, I want to watch ET. Well, like, which streaming platform is that on? And now you got to find it. And if you think about that from your members or one of your prospects too, someone who's thinking about joining your organization for information, how do they know which one of these things on the screen right now to go to find what they want? And what if it's in multiple spots? What if I'm looking for information on ankle fractures? I just went skiing this weekend, so that's top of mind. And what if there's something sprinkled across these different systems? It's a organization in medicine, and I'm looking for research in this field. It could be across these different systems. Are we expecting those prospective members and those members to go to those different systems to find that information? Not an ideal scenario. You don't want them to have to do that. And that's really what Johnny is talking about. This is what federation is about. You maybe have heard the term federated search. It's another way of saying aggregated search, aggregation, content aggregation. You're taking knowledge, content from these different systems, and you're pulling them together into one index. So those individual systems are still there. Looking at this graphic here and at the text next to it, maybe your foundation piece is what Johnny was talking about. Maybe it's your association management system. I'm looking here at the bottom of the pyramid. Maybe your organization built atop social media, you have a very strong social media presence. Maybe you also have a content management system to manage your website, and those are your bedrocks. And then on top of that, you're building. By the way, for every organization, these priorities are going to be different. Your bedrock for your organization may be learning. It may be your learning management and your courses and testing and certification and so forth. Maybe that's your bedrock. Maybe that's what forms the base of your pyramid. For other organizations, maybe the community. Whatever it may be, the idea is all of these different layers join to form a whole. And that's what it is that we're talking about today. Remember that previous slide with all the different little circles? This is just another way of showing that, maybe with some priorities laid out, because that's another reality of aggregating your knowledge into one index. It's not all created equal. You may say, hey, our newsletters are super valuable. We love our newsletters. We love our members. We love sending them to our members. But maybe these aren't as critical in the content knowledge hierarchy. We want them in there, but maybe that's at a lower level. It's not one of the foundational items. The converse of that is, hey, we have this new podcast and it's super important, and our executive director does the podcast and they invite guests every other week, and we publish these, and we really want to get, I was about to say eyeballs on it, I guess ears on it, and we really want to promote this podcast and get people subscribed to it and get people engaged with it. Well, maybe that's something that you want to favor in your aggregated content. so that you get more of those subscribers and you get more people interested in the podcast and what it is they're doing. So let's talk about what impact this can make in your organization doing something like this, and what are the outcomes of it by doing this. And some of these outcomes a little bit later on in a few minutes, we're going to show you some examples of what we mean, some real world examples of what we mean, so you can picture this in your head. But a big part of this is that second bullet there, ending the data silos, right, Johnny? Because again, thinking of that graphic we had up earlier, a member or a prospective member comes to your digital front door of your organization, and they're seeing one slice of the knowledge that you have to share with them. Even for some veteran, we're going to touch on this in a minute as well, even for some veteran members of your organization, they may not be aware that there's data in other silos that would help them do their jobs. So helping blur the lines, let's say, between those data silos, using some of these outcomes, a search that's looking at all of those nooks and crannies, maybe having a topic hub, and again, we'll explain what that means in a minute. These are things that can help those audience members, your constituents, discover and interact, and then they derive more value from your organization.
Also, it'll help them, excuse me, to understand better the content that your organization, your members are looking for, but are not finding. The holes in your content. You'll begin to understand that we have folks coming to our website and they're not finding these things. And that's really important to know as you move along as an organization. Now, on the flip side, there's an abundance of content around certain things. And that's something you also want to know too, because then you want to be able to shift your resources to the areas that need the most help.
You remember that pyramid graphic, that triangle graphic on the slide previous? Yeah, not all content created equal. To Johnny's point, maybe you're going to identify that, hey, there's some people looking at this, because there's that analytics piece too. Right now, not only is perhaps your content siloed across these different systems, and again, each one of those systems is a best of breed system, ideally, and that's okay. You actually want that because you want a best of breed system. That's not the problem that you have too many systems. The problem is you want to be able to draw those together. And one of the additional benefits of that, when you draw those together, is that better data analytics. And Johnny just touched on it a little bit. Those analytics are getting fed off of that data. Now the catch, and this is a bit glass is half empty, the catch with the data analytics is someone's got to be looking at them, right? Your Path LMS instance, it's shedding off a ton of analytics. Someone's got to be looking at that stuff so that you know, hey, this is what people are demanding. This is what people are after, so that we understand this is where we need to go next to elevate our organization. So let's talk about the member journey. Johnny, you always love to talk about the member journey. Maybe you could talk about why journeys are important for those folks who are coming to, for example, your website.
Sure. It's important that folks that are not familiar with your organization, when they come to your site, that they find what they're looking for, or else they'll go somewhere else to find what they're looking for, and you'll lose that opportunity to convert them. You also have, in the next level, your early career folks. You need to make a connection with them. And in order to do that, they need to be able to see that you have information that's specifically for them, that they can find easily and frictionlessly and engage with it. And so on and so forth for the rest of the groupings on here, mid-career, late career, veteran. They all have specific needs. And unless you have a comprehensive view of your knowledge base, you can't feed that out to them. because what they need to see is spread across all those data silos that Adam was talking about. So it's very important that this is a new way of engaging with your members. It's more comprehensive and it's more frictionless than what they're experiencing right now.
Analogy, I like analogies, and Johnny knows this from me a long time. And I have two that come to mind. One is, it's kind of like being the host at a party. And the doorbell rings, you go over, and you're like, oh, it's so nice to see you. And you bring them in, you show them where the bathroom is. Here's the food over here. Oh, have you met Bob and Kathy? And then rinse and repeat. Then you go back to the door and you do the same thing. Ideally, you're doing this for those who are coming to visit your website. They're coming in, you're saying, hey, welcome, here's, what is it that you need? Tell me. And you're like, oh, well, you know what? We have some journal articles about that. There's a couple modules in our learning system about that. We also have a couple of pages on our website. Oh, and here's a video on our Vimeo channel that's also related to that topic. And one's like, oh, that's great. Thanks so much. And then you go and you get the next person who's now coming in. They may have completely different needs. They're looking for something totally different. We often have in our minds, this is how it should be. There's one path to something. But in reality, there are a billion paths to that same thing. Someone else may take a different route to find that data, and that's okay. Some people think based on topic, for example. I'm coming here to look for migraine treatments or the latest on migraine research. And someone else may be coming and they're looking based off of their career level, their audience-based navigation. Like, hey, where are you in your career? Well, I'm late career. Okay, well, here's some stuff that we found has been helpful for those who are late career for our organization. So that other person, they're going straight topic-based navigation. I'm just interested in this topic. Show me what you got. This other person's like, I kind of have been at this a little bit. I'd like to see what you're recommending to me based on where I am in my journey with this organization. Both of those approaches are great and encouraged even. You want to allow those different entry points to be able to find what it is that, not only what you're looking for, and this is my next analogy, but also maybe some stuff that you weren't looking for. Who's ever run into Target? You're just going in to get, toothpaste, and you come out $96.72 later. You're like, what happened? And it's those buys as you're going down the aisle. You're like, oh yeah, we need, I forgot we were out of that cereal. I'm like, oh, look, that thing, that's kind of cool. Let me get that basket. And oh yeah, we need a new extension cord, whatever. And all of a sudden you've loaded up. Well, that's what you want visitors to your organization to do. You want them to have those impulse buys in a way, don't you? They're coming in, I just want to see when the next annual meeting is. Or I know my supervisor told me I have to go take this course. I'm just going to go do it. But what if something else catches their eye? Hey, did you know we also have this? There was an article published in our magazine 3 months ago that's related to what it is you're after. Oh, that's interesting. Click. Or there's this discussion going on in our community right now. Maybe there's been 16 posts about it and you have something to say about it. Well, now you're getting drawn in. Now that target cart is getting filled up. So someone came in just to do that one task, but you're showing them, remember those bubbles, that bubble graphic or the triangle graphic? You have all this other knowledge. Maybe they were just looking for one little slice, but now you're showing them, here's this world of other stuff that maybe you want to take a look at too. So this is really easy to envision, I think, when we're talking about search and someone is entering in a search term and you're showing answers to their search based off across all of those different silos of information. But the reality is, and Johnny touched at this at the top of the call, this concept of having content aggregated, you can layer different bits, different presentation layers, let's say, on top of those different information bits. So yeah, you can do search, but what about having a chat? Sure. It's pulling from that same base of knowledge. What about having like this concept of a content hub? And I'm going to show you an example here. What about having a widget that you could share if your organization has chapters, for example, and you want to be able to share with them sort of news from the home office or news from the national office or events or important information. You can do those types of things once you have your content aggregated. So I had some examples here that I'm going to show you. I think maybe it's coming the slide after this, but some of this plays into artificial intelligence. And so some folks may look into and take that, I mentioned earlier, that glass is half full, glass is half empty approach. And for those who the glass is half full, well, that's that 80% mark. Like it's 80% good. Glasses half empty, it's at 20%. So that 20% glasses that half empty might be someone is, asks a question of a chatbot, for example, or does a search. And the answer that comes out is like, nope, like that's not right. It's partially right, but that's not what I was looking for. But then the other way of thinking that, flipping it on the reverse of that, actually, that's pretty impressive. It's not perfect, but that's pretty impressive, the answer that it came back with. And that's a general rule of thumb that I like to apply really to almost all technology or any software. No software solution that you purchase is going to be that 100% mark. It's typically 80-20. Most of it's there. You have to be willing to compromise a little bit, though. And the benefits of that compromise is you get a stable platform. It's doing that 80% super, super, super well, and you're at peace with that. It's the same thing with AI. Folks say, oh, this thing is garbage. It's not answering my questions. Well, actually, is it? It's helping that member along their journey. It's not answering the question entirely, but it's helping them push them along. Right, Johnny?
Right. I would add to that. We hear a lot of happy talk about artificial intelligence and how it can be applied to organizations. It's great, but let's face it, it needs to be trained. It needs to understand the terms that your organization uses and the concepts that drive the organizations. That's what makes up that 20%. The subject matter experts that feed information into the artificial intelligence software, and from using that, it can learn and start to cover more of that 20% that's missing, get it up into the 90s. And then once you're there, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about that. But now I'm jumping back to some of those examples, and AI does play a role in this too, because it's determining, hey, is this topic about career development? But this is an example of a content hub. And so you may have content and you want to use AI, for example, to categorize that content. It typically works best when you already have a taxonomy. So a taxonomy, a list of words and or phrases that are meaningful to your constituents, meaningful to your audience of users. It could be 50 terms, it could be 100 terms, you have them in a spreadsheet, and you tell the AI engine, here's stuff, words, phrases that are meaningful to our audiences. And then you train it, and then you stick it on your content and say, go forth and categorize that content. It's called topic modeling. And then you can come up with something like this, where you have a content hub. You remember I said earlier, everyone's brains think differently. Someone who has a topic-based brain maybe would appreciate having a list like this. Hey, I'm looking for information on, quality outcomes. This is maybe a healthcare organization. Oh, there's 11 content items that they're recommending and I take a look at when I want to learn about quality outcomes. Click, let me go see what those 11 items are. We talked about chat. Imagine someone coming to your site, and this is basically like a search. It's the same thing, It's just has slightly different dressing on it. And it's saying, hey, what can we help you with today? What are you looking for? And someone could come in and say, I'm looking for information on quality outcomes as I expand my medical practice. And it'll think for a minute and it'll say, well, here's some tips and here's some resources that we think you'll find helpful. Some of those resources, again, pulling from all of your different information silos. One of those may be a course in Path. One of those may be a product available for purchase in your AMS. One of those may be a chat in the community. Whatever it may be, having it draw from all of that knowledge is the key. If it's just pulling from one source, like your website, for example, you're missing out all of that other knowledge that's available to your members and to those prospective members. And you want to let them know, hey, we've got that too. Search, of course, is another way that someone's interacting. And even something like a directory. Maybe you have a member directory or a supplier directory, and someone wants to be able to drill down to find the exact type of company to work with or member to work with. Make that available to them. Maybe this data is coming out of different systems. Maybe some of it is, as I said earlier, a paid provider directory. Maybe some of this is pulling out of your association management system or your CRM. It shouldn't matter. Those silos to the end user, they just see you as one organization, one system. And ideally, when they come to your website, they see your organization as, oh, this is amazing. It all looks like it's just one big system. You just want it to work. Remember, I'm not sure Apple still uses it, but at one point in time, they said it just works. That was like one of their, I think, unofficial maybe mottos. It just works. You open it up, you turn it on, it just works. That's ideally what's happening for your organization. It just works. They're able to discover content no matter where it lives. So now we're going to jump back to AI and talk about how there's some competition. And Johnny just touched on this briefly a minute ago. But maybe 3 years ago, even before that, maybe 5 years ago, it's January of 2024 right now as we're broadcasting this. But users maybe had to come to your organization to find the answers they were looking for. Well, it's much easier because these AI models have trained ChatGPT and others, have trained their AI technology on your knowledge, using your knowledge. And so now someone can go use one of those systems, one of those platforms. And using my example before, I'm looking to expand my practice and I'm looking for best practices. Well, it's possible that it's answering your question in this other external system that you have no control over. It's answering that question based off of data from one of your information knowledge bases, one of your content knowledge bases we've been talking about. And that's a challenge. And then over time, you can see this graph represents, now there's a lot more places where users can get that knowledge from, and maybe they don't need to get it from you anymore. And so how do you deal with that? And what do you do? And Johnny touched on this a little bit. There are now concerns about copyright lawsuit. The New York Times filed a lawsuit a month or two ago in late 2023 to OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, saying, hey, you were indexing and training your large language model, your AI engine, using our intellectual property that, we pay journalists and an entire team at our publisher to build. And that's a really tough nut to crack because it's a gray area. This is information that's published publicly, yet it's also the copyrighted and the intellectual property of the organization that published it. And so what do we do about this? How do we deal with these things? What happens when someone, remember that chatbot I showed you a couple of slides ago? What happens when someone asks that a question, but there's implications to the answer? It's one thing if, you ask somebody, when's the next annual meeting? And it gives a bad date. Although there could be implications for that too if they go and book a flight and hotel and so forth. But what if it's like a legal question? What if you're a bar association and someone asks a question like, "Hey, am I allowed to do this?" Or what if it's a medical question? And what if the information that it gives back is inaccurate? Well, now what? Because now someone's associating that poor answer or that incorrect response with your organization. Right now, if they do it at one of those external sites like ChatGPT, for example, they can write it off and say, "Oh, ChatGPT got it wrong." But what if it's coming from your group? What do you do then, John?
Well, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well said, I suppose. And you have to think about, okay, when we're giving this information out, we're talking to our constituents, talking to our audiences, that accuracy is important. And ideally, you're having that information pull from your knowledge. So remember that way back at the beginning of the presentation, all those different circles, that represents all of the different knowledge for your organization. Ideally, if you deploy one of these features we've been showing you, you're only drawing from that knowledge. If you let external knowledge seep in, which is what makes those other chats so impressive, you're introducing perhaps competitor knowledge into your knowledge, inaccurate knowledge into your knowledge, copyright issue knowledge into your knowledge, and then it starts to become a very sticky wicket, if you will. And thinking about your aggregating your content into one index and then layering on top something that we're talking about here, a chatbot, for example, then it becomes very, very important about the accuracy and what it is you're providing your users. So that's something for you to be thinking about. We want to wrap it up here, talk about leveraging your investments. Again, best of breed systems, that's the way to go. It's 2024. It's been the way to go for several years now. Stay away from the all-in-one systems, go into systems that just do one or two things really, really, really well. But then you want to leverage those. Remember the host at the door, you want to show them, hey, here's where you can go to take a course. Here's where you can go to read an article from our journal. Here's where you can go to participate in our community. You want to help leverage those things. It's not the, if you build it, they will come. You have to, if you build it, show them it's there, then they will use it. And that's what we see one of our jobs at Fuse is to help drive users, site visitors to those different resources so that you can leverage those resources that you've invested in and spend and not just money in, although that's certainly a big factor, but also just the human capital involved with standing up one of these systems. You want to get the most bang for that human capital time spent and money spent and drive traffic to those resources. That's part of your job.
And let's face it, what's wrong with making a little money while you're fulfilling your mission and providing a service to your constituents?
And with that, Shadi, I think you should have the last word. We're going to wrap it up here and do some Q&A, and we're looking forward to that. But if you remember nothing else from this presentation, what should it be, Johnny?
Call me. I'm just kidding. A couple of key points. There's a lot of conversation going on right now all over the world, especially in the association space as well, around AI. And a lot of what we've shown you today is driven by AI. But underneath that, the content aggregation index that Adam referenced earlier, and I referenced as well, is the key to driving all those technologies. Federated search is not possible without content aggregation. Chatbots are not possible. Summarizing answers for search results, not possible. You have to look at aggregating all of your content so that it all performs in a comprehensive and efficient way. So if you want to take advantage of these technologies that we talked about, that's where you have to start. And if nothing else, just remember that there are a lot of tools out there, but they all require an effort to aggregate your content and to train your content. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. And yeah, let's get chatting. We hope that there's some great comments from the audience, and we'd love to engage with you a little bit more here for the remaining minutes of our presentation today.
Wow, what a great presentation. And we've had some equally great questions come in. So without further ado, let's get to these questions. Our first question is, what are your top tips for developing a solid content strategy that makes content easy to find and cuts through the noise?
Thanks, Janie, and thanks, Kai. And thanks for that question, whoever asked that. Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. I'd say, let's go with the top three. I'd say first, it's understanding your audience. I used to, in a previous life, ran a web development group, Janie, and we talked about bad boardroom audience disorder. And that's when just the folks around the table are thinking about what the audiences are and what the audiences need. But you really have to think about their needs, their preferences, their behaviors, not just those of the individuals around the boardroom table at the organization. And then, of course, create content that resonates for each one of those audiences' interests and addresses their pain points. So understand your audience is numero uno when it comes to, as a top tip for having a content strategy. I'd say next, do some keyword research. This is, you can put on your nerdy hat a bit and look for what are high performing keywords in your industry. What are people looking for? And then once you have those answers, and this is related to a comment we had before when someone said, how do you recommend capturing members' conversational language? You saw that that question. This is very similar. Do the keyword research and then optimize your content based on what your research tells you. So if everyone's looking for best practices for maintaining gear-based machines, well, you gosh darn better on your website have a lot of content that's built around that, quality content that's built around that topic. And I'd say the last thing, which may catch some of you by surprise to think about, is consistent branding. So you have all these different systems that we talked about today in the webinar. And sometimes you go to these different systems, you're like, are we on the same planet? Is this coming from the same organization? The colors, the logo, the branding, the marketing, cannot say enough. It matters. It matters. If you think about your favorite brands, places that when you visit their web presence and you're interacting with them, you'll see very consistent branding, consistent brand message. Branding isn't just about how it looks, but it's also what's the messaging. You want to be recognizable. You want to be seen as trustworthy. So I'd say that those are my three big hits. Understand your audience, do keyword research, Janie, and have consistent branding.
I think I would add to that data governance, looking at what the state of play of your system, of the content that's in the systems. Is it all tagged? And let's face it, most of the time it's not. So that's one thing. But to put data governance practices in place for going forward so that you can make better use of these tools, and recognizing that AI can help you with the content that you have that may not be exactly where you want it to be. It's not the big lift that it was even a few years ago. So definitely take that into account.
That's great. That's awesome. Let's move on to our next question, which is, as AI and semantic search continue to evolve, what should association content strategies focus on to future-proof discovery and remain relevant, and what pitfalls should they avoid?
Oh my gosh, these are some hard hitting questions. No softballs from this audience. Let me start off with the pitfalls. Again, there's so many. I'd say maybe number one is ignoring mobile users. It's interesting. We've been talking about mobile users. Remember when responsive design was like a thing, but organization, it's just mind boggling. You're still doing it. You just can't. You have to optimize what your web presence and your web presences, different systems. Otherwise, just a huge drop in audience engagement. I've seen the numbers happen, and it's like, okay, what's happening here? Then you go look at the product, and you're like, oh, that's what's happening. Folks using tablets, folks using smartphones. Related to that, the UX, the user experience. Fast loading times matter. Seamless experience across devices matters. Easy navigation matters. Intrusive ads. Have you ever been trying to look at something and like something's popping up on your screen? You click that to go away, then something else flies in from some other place. All of those things negatively impact the user experience. And then I'd say looking at analytics. Not looking at those analytics, it's tough. I know it was related to one of the earlier questions is, how do you capture that language that's coming in from the AI bot and then use it to craft your response? Well, you get that from the analytics, and that's a full-time job in and of itself. And that's a whole nother presentation. But I'd say those are the pitfalls: ignoring the mobile users. What was the second one I said? Oh, the really optimize that user experience. That's the load times and the seamless experience across all the different platforms and devices. And then looking at your analytics. In terms of things that you can do to help future-proof your content, we just touched on it in that last piece. I'm sorry, I think it was, again, the question that the earlier participant asked. Write your content in a way that fits for natural language processing, which is AI. Write your content in a conversational way, because users in the future are going to be interacting with your content in a conversational way. What's the best way for me to build a marketing plan for a young medical organization that specializes in dentistry? Well, your content that you have available, tips that helps somebody with that, needs to also be written in a conversational way, because that's going to result in a better answer for that user who asked that question. Also, when we talk about, you mentioned semantics, there is something, I encourage everyone to Google this. Google semantic SEO, search engine optimization. And it basically, in short, it means that you're focusing your search engine optimization on the intent behind user queries, not just what the keywords are. So if a keyword is, dental hygiene, you want to focus actually, what is the intent of the user? Like, what do they want to know about dental hygiene? How to write a good blog post about it? How to practice good dental hygiene? How to find the best tips behind running an office with dental hygiene? And that's what's important. It's not necessarily that you have an article about dental hygiene. It's an article behind the intent of what someone would be looking for with that.
That is awesome. And I think we probably have time for one last quick question. And this question just came in, which is, can you offer advice or features to accommodate different learning styles, meaning visual or hearing, and other ways to improve user experience?
Again, so one of the things and thanks so much again for these great questions. Just can't say enough. And as a speaker, it's so wonderful to hear these questions and interact with all of you. So thank you. Voice search optimization. And so there's a rise of voice activated searches, optimizing your content for voice search queries. It's the same thing. It's conversational. When someone's asking a question using their voice, we tend not to speak in a truncated way. And oftentimes we search, though, in a truncated way. But when we're speaking conversationally. And so, again, optimizing your content to play better, let's say, with voice search optimization, with folks who are doing voice searching. And then Also consider answering those questions concisely. And so if someone's using a screen reader, it's not as practical for the screen reader to read out this long, detailed response. Your constituents are looking for those quick hits, those sound bites. So imagine the producer in your ear saying, all right, Bob, just get to the point. And again, structure your content around those sound bites. This is what individuals want to hear. And again, the mobile device is a big, big part of it. I mentioned it earlier. Mobile devices are built with accessibility in mind. You can zoom in on things, pinch and zoom. It has the voice capabilities. There's different ways to interact with content. So you want to make sure that your technology presence is accepting of that and excels in that area. I hope that helps. Thanks so much, Janie and Kai, again, for a great session.
Of course, and thank you so much. And if your questions weren't answered today, please feel free to reach out to Johnny for more information. And thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, The Power of Federated Search, Supercharge Member Engagement, led by Johnny Clayton and Adam Hostetter of Fuse Search. Feel free to reach out to Johnny with any additional questions. This concludes today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you soon.